I'm Jeff Larsch. I love data and science, and I especially love data visualizations that bring science to life, to make it accessible for all of us to understand complex subjects. Now, if I were to ask you to think of any visualization of evolution, you'd probably see this one in your mind. And it's not very good, but you can find others in this classic book written by Richard Dawkins called Climbing Mount Improbable. And specifically in a chapter called Silken Fetters, where he talks about how competition for food and genetic mutations over the millennia have progressed the spider's spinning patterns to settle on what we think of as the classic spider web, the Charlotte's web of spiders. It actually describes a old school computer program, one from the very early days of personal computers. It's called WebSpinner. And what it did was it created these simulated generations of spiders, or specifically the webs of these spiders, because every spider has genetically imprinted in it the pattern that it would use to scaffold their silk. So here you see 50 green dots. Each of those dots represents a fly or some other flying bug. And the game, if you will, is who is going to be the victor in a genetic competition to spin the most efficient web. So here's one example, and this is taken from some other species of spiders. They programmed in the traits that they observed in nature. So there are some spiders who actually do this type of configuration or something looking like it. And it definitely follows all of the architecture of what we think of when we imagine a spider web that we've encountered in our walks through the forest. There are two scores. The web protein score is the expenditure of silk in order to create this trap. The bug protein score is the success of that. In other words, how many times are my sticky silken threads actually encountering a bug so I can eat it and I can live to spin another web tomorrow. Because believe it or not, they spin one every day. The silk that they produce on a Tuesday, they actually gobble up and partially recycle to spin the next day. Net score of -1. So this isn't a very successful spider. That was the 5th generation in the simulation, and this is the 10th generation. It's a different configuration, a little bit better, but we're talking about very small numbers in this simple data visualization. So you don't take it as a real upward trend. This spider obviously was inspired by German Expressionism, and it too was not successful. It had a web protein score of 7. Subtract that from the bug protein score, you get a -1. Here is something a little bit closer. Obviously, this spider, based on its genetic mutations from breeding with other spiders, it became more ambitious in its spinning. Unfortunately, the trail to success is strewn by the body of pioneers. Similarly, this spider, although it was very pioneering to expend this much, and frankly, it could have succeeded, that configuration just didn't work in this particular simulation. This one is more of a basket weaver than a web spinner. The protein score was about the same as last. It actually is netting a positive, so that's not bad. This one, it nets a negative just because of where it intersects with those green dots. And here we finally have something closer to a successful modern day spider web that the spider that spun it evolved into. And this is the the final one. And what was fascinating is that they could run these simulations in a matter of hours. And today they could be run in a matter of nanoseconds with faster computing power. But what was fascinating was that the web spinner always settled on this. If the scores, the scoring protocols were kept the same. It was fascinating. And so before I conclude this video, I wanted to talk about how to visualize one other type of evolution of a similarly complex creature, in my opinion. It's called the antlion. I should tell you that the reason that Dawkins wrote the book, Climbing Mount Improbable, was it was his response at the time, and this is several decades ago, to creationists who had come up with the idea of intelligent design. In other words, only a real designer could create such complex mechanisms as a spider web or an eyeball. And in his book, he shows how it takes a long, long time, but it is possible through randomness and natural selection. And in this case, what has the antlion evolved to do? So the antlion is the larval stage of the mayfly. I grew up walking through sandy parts of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and seeing these cones and actually finding these critters fascinating, although they're absolutely hideous. I won't show you a picture of them. Don't Google it unless you want to be appalled. These larval mayflies are these gross little things that all hide out at the very bottom of these cones. These cones are ant traps. So it actually hangs out there, waits for an ant to stumble along. When it feels some of the grains of sand falling in, it immediately and frantically starts shoveling sand in the direction of those first few grains, actually landing over the ant and in an avalanche pulling the ant closer and closer to its jaws, where its fluids are drained. And it has a meal. But how did it get optimized that way? So I didn't take into account the bugs in this, and I'm just going to do this simple sketch for you, but this will give you an idea. So remember, the mayfly starts as an egg, and that's this yellow. And imagine that one of them is like this, and it may have a few ants because it's dug furrows. By the way, this is called a doodle bug for a reason. There's another. But the most ants are consumed by the natural selection that you see here, where it is able, instead of encountering ants as it digs these random furrows in the sand, it actually does a ever decreasing spiral and tossing the sand out to create the cone where it can settle in and it can wait for its prey, as opposed to basically doodling all over the sand and praying that it finds one. So I hope you find this interesting. Return back. There will be others. And I thank you.